All right, so we're good? Okay. So, how many of you know the story of Jonah? A couple of you do. Okay. Well, with Jonah, you learned from Vacation Bible School, but with Jonah, the story was that God told him to go to Nineveh to tell the people there to turn from their wicked ways. But through that, Jonah fled, didn't he? Jonah did not go to Nineveh.
On the ship.
And what happened?
He tried to leave on the ship.
And a big storm came up.
And they threw him over the ship.
They threw him over and he got swallowed by a great big fish. All right? So, you know the story of Jonah a little bit. We're going to put a little bit of a twist on it tonight. All right? We're going to play a quick game that you're going to have access to your feet. You can remain seating, but just slide back. What you're going to try to do. All right, so you're going to try to do this, but whatever I tell you to do it as fast as you possibly can. Okay? So you get it? It's not going to be anything nasty, I promise. Just do it as fast as you possibly can. All right, so are y'all ready? Y'all ready to go? You got to pay attention. All right, here we go. Clap 3 times. Clap 3 times. Clap 3 times. Touch your head, your shoulders, knees, toes, nose, your feet stink. So, what was the first thing you had to do? Chris. Wait, Chris, what was the first thing you had to do?
Clap 3 times.
That's not right.
Yeah, let's pay attention.
You had to pay attention and listen. All right, y'all can go ahead and scoot back up. All right, we're going to do Jonah. We're going to go through the whole entire book of Jonah tonight, okay? So go ahead and turn to Jonah. It's in the Old Testament. So during that process of you having to listen, what did you have to listen for?
What you said.
What I said. Basically my command, right? Of what you were supposed to do. Well, through all of that, was it difficult for you to listen? No? It was pretty easy, right? Because I spoke clearly. Okay? Jonah's its own book.
I know what we're like, what's it?
What's in front of?
I'm going to ask you that.
You run
It's past Proverbs. You can look it up. So, all right. So, while y'all are still turning there, all right, it's right after Obadiah and right before Micah. All right? So while y'all are still turning, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we got 4 points tonight to talk about the character of Jonah and the character of you and how you should live your life. First off, we have to listen to God. What did God tell Jonah to do? Go to Nineveh. In verse 2, God told Jonah to rise and go to Nineveh, the great city, and confront them with their wickedness. Well, Jonah just said, yeah, I'll get up and get it right on that, God, right? No. What did he do? He fled. He went down to the sea and got on a ship, and he was headed to Taurus. Within that, what happened to him? Well, no, during that process, what was he doing?
Sleeping.
No, he was running from God. He was running from God, trying to get away from what God was wanting him to do with his life. How many of us try to run from something in our lives? I know I have before. I know that I've ran from things in my past. And it can be relationships. It can be church. It can be family. It can be all those things. But throughout that whole entire process, what are we doing to the problem? Making it worse. Because all it's doing is growing, isn't it? And how often do you find out that when you run from something, it has a hard way of catching up to you? And when it catches up to you, it slaps you pretty good, doesn't it? It's kind of like a lie. Once you tell a lie, well, yeah, it catches up to you, but you try to tell another lie to cover it, it just keeps growing and growing and growing until it just all crumbles apart. Well, in Jonah's case, Jonah was just trying to outrun God. Can you do that? Can't outrun God. Because the great thing about God is we only see things from this perspective, looking straight forward. God sees everything from an upward perspective, looking down. He sees the path ahead. He sees all the blocks, the stumbling paths that we're going to have to take. He sees all of that. But we can't see it because we're not there yet. So God knows where troubles are going to come up in our life before we even get there. But it's how we act on them and how we turn to God through them that makes the difference. And Jonah didn't do that. Secondly, we need to accept the call from God. How many of you have accepted a call to play on a team, to play a sport, to be a part of a group, to be a part of a church? Y'all have all accepted the call to come here tonight. So we've all accepted calls in our life. But the calls that are important from God are ones we can't let go. Because through that, what happens to us? We stumble if we try to avoid them. You look at Jonah, and a great example of that was when he actually got on the ship. He went down into the hole. He started to sleep in the bottom of the hole. And as they got further and further out to sea, a huge storm arose and started causing all kinds of havoc out there on the ship. What happened?
The big storm came, and Jonah said he thought he got the boat, the storm would come, so they don't want the boat.
Yes, he did say the storm was going to come because of him. But they did something before that. All the crew cast lots.
Oh, yeah.
And that's basically like drawing straws to see who's the odd man out. And it fell on Jonah. And through that, they asked, well, what has your God done? Or what have you done to your God to allow you to cause this upon us? Because they didn't want to perish. They didn't want to die. And through all that, he told me, he said, I'm running from God. But just throw me overboard. Just get rid of me, and this will cease. And they're like, we can't throw you overboard. So they threw everything else off the ship, all of their cargo, everything, their material, everything. And they tried to row back to shore. Well, through that process, the waves got stronger and stronger and stronger. And they couldn't go anywhere. They just keep getting pushed further and further out to sea. And then finally, they threw Jonah over the side of the boat. And immediately, the waves ceased. Could you imagine being in basically a hurricane, and all of a sudden, just with a blink of an eye, just quit? You'd be astounded, wouldn't you? You'd be so amazed at God's power that you would just be baffled. We wouldn't know what to say. That's how the crew was. The crew was amazed at God's fulfillment within that, saving them lives because of what he was doing. And then what happened to Jonah?
Swallowed by a big fish.
He got swallowed by a big fish. Could you imagine a big fish swallowing you? Basically, it'd be like a whale trying to swallow us now. I'd be terrified. I hate the ocean. I hate the ocean. There's jellyfish in it. They sting you. Sand gets where it ain't supposed to go. It's just bad. But in all of that, with everything we do, think about Jonah's perspective of getting swallowed by a fish, getting swallowed by that whale. Could you imagine the smell? Just the smell alone make you cringe your nose right then, wouldn't it? I mean, you're sitting in this belly, all these fish guts, and muck and seaweed, and everything else. Do what? And you can't see either, because it's dark. And that leads us to our third thing. We need to cry out to God. We need to cry out to God in everything we do in our lives. When you cry out to God, what are you doing?
Asking for help.
You're asking for help. You're also praying to God. Prayer is one of the greatest things that we have in communication with God. It is the best skill that we have to be able just to talk to God whenever we need Him, whenever we're in desperate need of something, or we just need somebody to talk to. How many of you have tried to go to someone with something very personal, but you couldn't trust them with it? I've done that. There are certain things that you can't go to parents about. There are certain things you can't go to your friends about. Who do you go to? You go to God. Because God already knows your problems. He already knows everything. But right there, Jonah cried out to God with all of his pain and his suffering. And what did God do?
He made the big fish spit him out.
He did. God answered his prayer and caused the fish to spit Jonah out onto the dry land. And through that, Jonah then understood that God protected me even in my moments of fleeing from him. Even in my moments of running from God, God was still protecting me. God was still had his hand over me and watching. Notice in chapter 3, when he actually entered the city of Nineveh.
Oh, that was disgusting.
It was bad.
Oh, yeah.
Man, they were doing all kinds of things that was
Beheading
not
people.
godly. They did. They were beheading people. They were selling stuff they weren't supposed to be selling. They were treating other people badly. But through all of it, Jonah told them, he told the entire city, look, you need to turn away from this because God's going to destroy your city in 40 days if you don't. But get this. Often, within that, everyone in the city turned away from what they were doing. Even the king. The king took off his robes, took off all of his nice garments, and put on sackcloth. How many know what sackcloth is?
Like what's
It
that?
says a sack with holes.
Yeah, it's
Just like that.
Kind of like burlap, right?
Yeah.
It's very similar to burlap. Well, then that, they all put burlap on and fasted for 40 days, trying to get back on God's good graces. And throughout that, could you imagine God's expectations for that? Like, could you imagine seeing that many people in a great city? There was 120,000 people inside that city. That's about the size of Macon, Georgia. Could you imagine if every single person in Macon, Georgia turned to God and just cried out and said, God, we are sorry for what we've done. Please forgive us. Turn us back to your way. Could you imagine what that would do to a country? To an entire world? All because of one person. Jonah. You have that same power to do that. We just have to cry out to God and ask for his guidance. Ask for his will to be in our lives. And through that, if we're doing it for God, we can't fail. Which that leads us to our last point. Lastly, we need to understand that God's will and purpose for our lives is so much greater than something we could understand. We can't understand God's thinking about how he wants us to treat others unless we're a part of God. We can't understand God's will for other people's lives because we're not supposed to be in control of that. Do you think if we understood everything, we would need God? There's a reason why we can't understand everything. There's a reason why we're not good at certain things, because we're not meant to be good at those things. I've told you this before, but there's 3 reasons why God put somebody in your life. It's for you to teach them something, them to teach you something, or for y'all two to come together to glorify the kingdom of God. And through all of that, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're growing in your relationship, right? Not only with your personal relationship with Christ, but you're also growing in your youth group and your spiritual. But you're growing with your youth group. We're growing together. Jonah actually got angry at God because he did not destroy the city of Nineveh. God decided not to destroy it. And through that, he got mad. It's okay to get mad at God sometimes because we can't see that greater picture of things. But through everything we do, we have to realize that God is still protecting us and leading us for what's best for all of his children. Now, sometimes it's difficult for us to get past that because we have our own selfish ambitions. But through that, everything we do, we look to God for guidance. Think about Jonah. Do you think Jonah would have been as completely devastated about God not destroying the city if he hadn't ran? Do you think? Because, I mean, if God knew that the city wasn't going to be destroyed, why did he go through all that trouble, right? So you look at all of that. But do you realize God had a bigger plan and picture for that?
What is Jonah ever got in first?
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing you was talking about recently.
But one thing that God did, though, to try to help Jonah understand his will and his grace, he actually put a plant there for Jonah. Jonah went on a hill and sat in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the desert, to actually watch the city of Nineveh, to see if it was going to be destroyed. Well, during that time, the sun was just pounding on him. God planted a plant that grew in one night big enough to completely shade him. In one night. The next day, God also put a caterpillar or a worm there to destroy the plant. And Jonah was even mad again. He said, God, take my own life because I don't deserve to live because of this. And through that, what was God trying to teach him? Obedience. God sees the greater picture in everything that he does. And through that, he was teaching Jonah that although I called you to do this, I called you to do it on faith. And you stepped out on faith and you trusted in me and you took my calling. Even though Jonah tried to run from him at first, often it catches up with us. The thing is, you can never outrun God in anything you do. But some of us are running from God now. Some of us today in here are running from God. Some of us are running from other things outside of God. You're running from stuff from your friends, your families, your dating relationships, all these things. You're running from the truth. We learn we have to be obedient to God. And if you're living a life centered with Christ at it, all those other things will get a lot more simple. Because through that, you're going to be talking to God. You're going to be asking Him for His guidance, for His leadership, and His wisdom to help you get through those tough situations. In everything you do, turn to Christ. Cry out to Him. Let Him know that you love Him. You will never regret it. So think about that this week. As y'all go back to school, as y'all finish this week up, as y'all play y'all sports, as you do everything you do, you can't outrun God, and He is always there for you.